Hey guys, welcome to the No Holds Barred Ethanol versus CO2. We're going round two here. Love it. And Dr. John, you did a great job last time.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
it was fun.
I think I did a great job last time.
Nobody's saying it,
but
Randall.
I know, I know, but you know, you gotta, right?
That's all right. That's
We're actually, all I do is facilitate questions. So you guys are the ones who are doing a great job, and the questions have been coming in all week.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Holy cow, this is going to be a kind of a ready to rumble moment, I think.
I think so.
And I see the questions already coming in, floating.
We got a whole bunch of pre-questions, and then I think we've had like a record. So we had over like 200 people register for this. So it's pretty amazing. We got our own little conference here.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
I love it. And, you know, we're going to go. So we want to make this educational. We want to keep it, you know, succinct. We don't want to really belabor everything. So we're going to try to keep this, you know, under an hour for sure. You know, 30 to 45 minutes is where we want to hit, and we'll carry over questions to the next week. We're, you know, if we still have this demand, we're going to do it again next week. So very cool.
Yeah.
I know this week is ethanol versus CO2.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is, Dr. John, if you can just kind of give us a little overview of and set the stage.
Sure.
And then I'll start working on the questions that are coming.
All right. All right. That sounds good.
Go.
So a lot of different ways to extract botanicals. Okay. And inevitably you're going to need some sort of solvent that will dissolve the resins that are in the botanical. And in order to do that, you have to choose your solvent. And when you do that, you have a lot of different choices. You know, historically, people have used, you know, organic. Some people have used inorganic. Some people use gases. Sometimes people will use like hydrocarbons, for example. In throughout history of chemical processing, it has been basically there's been very number of different solvents, a huge number of different solvents. Okay, so one thing that when we started in 2013, started to look at the different kinds of solvents, we just wanted to make sure that we had a very pure solvent. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have residuals in there. We didn't want to have to deal with contamination risk. And so that's one of the reasons why we have, why we chose CO2 as our solvent to really be our muse, basically be the object of our affection and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that other solvents won't work. Like for example, you know, 2013, I was doing ethanol extractions at really low, you know, low temperatures. Just there are a lot of different trade-offs that you need to think of when you just choose which solvent system you're going to use. So, so really the trade-offs are the following, kind of in basically a couple different categories. The first category would be cost, and you know, how much does it take? How much variable cost is the ethanol extraction or the CO2 extraction really adding to your overall cost per kilogram to produce? So that's a key issue. The second thing would be just residuals and the risk of residuals, and you know, that is something that you need to think about for sure, because it's going to add to your revalidation costs. It's going to add to your you know, your testing costs and all of those things. So there's a bunch of different things that you need to think about with that. And then the third thing is you know, availability. Like nowadays, you know, there's been a real issue with availability of ethanol itself. So we're trying to get ethanol for basically hand sanitizer and hand cleaning, and that's a really big issue, because we can't even get a 55-gallon drum of ethanol in here or IPA in here to really get us going on hand sanitizer. So how do people who need to command, you know, hundreds and even thousands of gallons actually operate? The answer is that they're having a hard time doing that. So anyway, so there we are. That's how I set it up, Randall. And, you know, so you got cost, you got residual and health and safety, and then you have availability. And those are the main categories. There are some subcategories. We'll get into those, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And the questions are pouring in. So we're going to get to those. There are a lot of questions that are carryovers from last week and some through the week, but I want to focus right now on ethanol versus CO2. If you guys are okay with that, if there's something pressing, let me know. If you got to jump, bail, let me know so that we can squeeze that in. But okay, so question. We're talking about the safety issue.
Yeah.
All right. And the cost issue and the availability issue. All right. But safety first. Talk a little bit about the differences of ethanol. Again, we touched on it last time, but touch again on what you can use, what you can't use, why you should use it, why most people are using what they probably shouldn't be using.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Basically, not all ethanol is equal. There's pure food grade ethanol, and that has a very specific, recipe. Basically, it can't have residual solvents in it. You can't drink it in large quantities, obviously, otherwise, you'll get hurt. But, certainly food grade ethanol is fit for human consumption. And then what happened was people wanted to basically come up with recipes so that they could use ethanol for other different reasons without incurring excise tax. And so there's this TTB board is what it's called, and they have different recipes. And there's a whole bunch of different recipes. You can go in there. It's administered by the BATF. And, some of them are approved for food use and whatnot. And so what happens is the chemical companies take pure ethanol or take a grade of pure ethanol, and then they pour in basically denaturants or chemical contaminants. And it's meant so that, the idea there is that it's meant so that people can't consume that ethanol. Okay, so that's where the residuals really come from. And so it's actually a additive. It's a non-natural additive that's added to the ethanol. And so you have basically two different categories of ethanol. One, you have a food grade, and the other you have a denatured ethanol. And the denatured ethanol, of course, is the issue because the denaturants themselves, it's really hard to completely remove those. In fact, you can see them in a lot of the extracts that are coming out of ethanol. So
okay, so the key is, taking that down to my level.
Yeah.
Don't drink your vanilla extract.
Well, don't drink your vanilla extract. Yeah.
Okay.
But also don't use ethanol that is you could run in your car,
right,
for example, to extract a food that you now are going to consume
and that
later.
would be kind of on the denatured side of what you're pumping in your car. You're not going to go take a drink of the hose at the gas station.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So don't do that.
Right.
All right. So that's the key. And that's my level. Right. Okay. So other areas of question, are you also seeing an issue with availability for methanol as well as ethanol out there?
Oh, good question. I don't know. We didn't really look at that. We don't buy methanol. If someone's going to use methanol as an extractant or someone as an extraction solvent, it would work.
Okay.
But I don't think so. It probably doesn't have the same issues because it's not used. Methanol is not used as an approved hand sanitizer.
Got it.
That should tell you something, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Another question about costs.
Mm-hmm.
So we use CO2 predominantly in our processes. That's what we do. We like that. And from a cost perspective, can you give us a benchmark of cost for CO2 versus a denatured in today's market?
Yeah.
Versus if you could get it. Versus food grade.
Okay, so the cost for denatured versus food grade. Yeah, it's boy, I don't know actually. I'd have to look at the prices. I don't have those numbers, but I think it's at least 10x less costly.
Okay.
And it has a lot to do with
10x denatured versus
denatured would be 10x less costly than at least that. And I don't have the exact numbers because but if you're going to use ethanol as an extractant, you should use food grade ethanol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is going to be 10x higher than denatured ethanol.
Right.
And is there a cost variable? What's the cost variable from CO2
Yeah.
solvents or versus
Right. Well,
denatured?
that's really where CO2 starts to shine.
Yeah.
Essentially because first of all, you have a lot of different factors that are contributing to your variable costs. Okay, so if you think about what is it that costs, what is it that's contributing to the cost? You have the loss of the ethanol, you have the actual ethanol itself, you have to change over the ethanol because you can't use it indefinitely because it's going to continuously get contaminated. Okay, and you can't continuously do that even if you try to reproof it. You have costs to revalidate it if you're in a GMP environment, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Then you have the costs associated with the actual say the actual raffinate is what they call it, the spent material that has a bunch of ethanol in it. Okay, and so when that has a bunch of ethanol in it, in some jurisdictions it's considered hazardous waste. So that's adding to your variable cost, and then you have to cool all that down. So that's also adding to the variable cost. Somebody had asked some questions about electricity and variable costs. Typically, for like 1 ton a day for like if you're just looking at the extraction component, you're looking at about maybe $77 per day to run like CO2 extractors, as opposed to like $480 to $500 a day to run ethanol extractors, and that's mostly due to what they call the heat of vaporization issues with ethanol. It just puts a lot of energy to get it into the vapor phase.
And I know on top of that, we haven't even covered the fact of insurance and explosion proof rooms and facilities issues and all of those hidden costs that are part of that process, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's more like infrastructure issues. So you have two different things. You have your variable costs, and then you have obviously your infrastructure costs. And those things are really both of those together really make ethanol as a solution very costly compared to CO2. I mean, just one other thing on that. We got, 4 cents, 5 cents a pound for CO2.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculously inexpensive.
That's a good deal.
Yeah.
That's a good deal. And a good memory on the kilowatt per hour consumption. I think, Bowden, you asked that question, and that is $77 a day running CO2 versus $500 a day, roughly just under for an ethanol. Whew, that's crazy. Are there any white papers on CO2 to maintain the integrity of the terpene profile?
Okay, so that's one of the things. So when you use ethanol to extract, all of the terpenes are coming out into that extract. Okay. And then you're decarboxylating it, and then you're probably going into some sort of distillation process after that. So during that post-processing, after you get the extract out, you usually lose all those terpenes. Okay, so one of the things that is very cool about CO2 is that you're able to do a couple different things. First of all, you're able to run in subcritical mode, which is a very common technique, been done for years, to get out some of the more volatile compounds into a prefraction. And that's a very soupy prefraction of terpenes, essentially. The other thing that you can do, like we do pre-processing, and we gather all of our terpenes out ahead of time. So, like for example, this is a jar of basically pure terpenes. Wow. So they're coming out. So they're done before extraction. What's great about that is they're not degrading. So it's got a lot of that small terpenes that are, contribute a lot to the flavor and aroma. So you want to try to maintain that. So that's really what, processing techniques really allow you to do.
Great.
And with ethanol, they're kind of all stuck in there. There's really no way to get them out once they're in there unless you do a whole nother distillation process and things like that. So that's the issue with that.
So in the process part of your methods where you remove the terpenes, where you can do that, that's when you can capture the most of the terpenes. Yeah. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way they're not degrading, which is really great. So,
okay. Can CO2 be used for processing other botanicals?
Absolutely. I mean, CO2 is used right now industrially. I think that at the end of the day, you're talking even for example, decaffeination of coffee is a really well-known means of extraction. Why do people use that instead of, say, ethanol? Well, the ethanol would over-extract. It doesn't have the selectivity. And then could you imagine what it would cost them in energy and all of that to really get that ethanol out? It'd be really, really difficult to do. So, that's the main thing. There's also other applications. We've done, lavender, we've done wheatgrass, sapomero. There's a bunch of different, options there for, different ginseng, and ghost peppers, just in case, and hops.
Oh.
Ghost peppers and hops.
I can only imagine ghost pepper extract. That sounds like an outtake.
Yeah, I think so. We're gonna get some of that. So,
Okay.
no, not yet. Yeah.
So, excellent. So excellent questions, excellent answers. Love the overview of the of some of these things. One of them that came, it's a carryover from last week. Somebody had really good memory. What's your favorite Scotch?
Oh, my favorite Scotch.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the Balvenie, and that's my favorite. It's a Highland, and so yeah, that I really like that.
Oh, that's good.
I love it. Favorites,
so. And I've tasted it, and it's very good.
Yeah.
John's a Scotch guy. I'm a bourbon guy. So, and
we get along.
I'm a rye bourbon guy, and we do have competitions.
Yeah, we do.
He wins. So we're good. Okay, back to ethanol versus CO2. One of the questions that came up is, are we just using CO2 because that's our business and then building all of these questions and models to justify that?
Right.
Or is this real, actual, validated stuff?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's like a guy with a hammer, every problem is a nail type of question. Okay, yeah, I get that. No, I mean, look, I'm a trained analytical chemist. I'm an expert in separations. Basically, I've been trained as a separation scientist, chemical engineer. So for the last 20 years, I've been practicing in that field. And, I had practiced about 11, 12 years from both an engineering standpoint and from a materials standpoint and from a, scientific standpoint. When I went in, I didn't have a piece of equipment that I was going to build. I didn't. So I chose my medium.
Sure.
And, so I chose it for purposes of basically cleanliness, quality, the ability to reach clinical grade, materials, not having to worry about residuals, mostly health aspects, because I didn't want to deal with the risk of residuals. And I also didn't want to, I know as a chemist, I can always measure those residuals. If you used them, I can see them in there because they're very, very low levels and I can see them in there. In fact, we have a laboratory that runs a lot of, like samples for people. So the ethanol people that turn in samples, they have residuals in there, acetone, propanol, they have hexane, heptane in there. They're at the low levels, but you can see them in there. So essentially, you could get a pass test on the, you can get a pass test with the analytical results, but you could still have a lot of that stuff in there. And to me, that is a big problem because, you can really kind of, it's really not good. I mean, I'll give you an example here. I made up a tincture here. This is a tincture. This would pass the test of the USP 467, which is the testing. So it would pass it. But it has in there, it has acetic acid, it has butanol, it has all these different chemical pentanol or pentane it has in there. It has ethanol. It has ethyl ether in there, formic acid, heptane. So if I sent this sample in and I sent it to a laboratory, they would send it back to me and they say it passes all the tests because it's underneath the level. But why don't you take a smell of that? And you open it up there.
Ooh, yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
That's my point right there. That's a completely legal tincture. And it's basically made up almost 100% of solvents that are legally okay to have in your product.
It smells kind of like airplane glue.
It's
Sorry.
You could probably use it as an airplane glue.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of like the,
I can't get my fingers off.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. It's something. So anyway, those are the main reasons. So as an analytical chemist, we're not just making up data to really provide a foundation for why we do things. Butane was used a lot when I first started this, and we looked at butane. We actually ran butane. We ran all the residuals. They're all in there. No way. Okay. We were doing ethanol extractions at was it minus 40 degrees with back in 2014, 2015. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did it.
Yeah.
And it was all there. And sure enough, I mean, the only way we could make it really work from a financial standpoint is if we use denatured ethanol. Well, as soon as the denatured ethanol came in, then it was like, okay, well, we're never going to get out those residuals. And of course, you can get them below the level that the FDA says is safe, but then they're in there, right? And that's then you got that. And literally, if you had a safe level of heptane, for example, in your tincture, okay, which the FDA says is 5,000 ppm, and you took 3 dropperfuls per day, you would be consuming about 470 milliliters worth of heptane per year. The issue with that is that the FDA has said, okay, 5,000 ppm is okay to have in your tincture because we do not have the data to show that it's unsafe.
Okay.
Just opposite of what they said about CBD, for example.
Wow.
Well, we don't have the data to show that it's safe, so then you can't have it at all or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's kind of an interesting thing. And it's an interesting history, but they cited one paper written in 1981 to say that, hey, look, it doesn't look like it's going to act in your neural system. But, we know a lot of things about biochemistry since 1981. Like, for example, all the effects of solvents on cognitive effects.
That's 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
I think it's time for another paper.
I think it's time, yeah. And yeah, so anyway, or they need to update their dossier, but they didn't do it yet. So you could still have a lot.
Okay. So
yeah,
I'm gonna shift gears just a little bit more because there's a lot of questions coming in saying, well, are there benefits of using ethanol in your process?
Right.
And can you do that? And I think what you said is that, yeah, if you're using food grade or medical grade ethanol, go for it. That's good. But your costs are really high right now, especially now,
right,
and even later. There's another question that came in about costs and to operate. And it's a lot less costly because of using CO2 versus ethanol. And it's a lot less costly because of power. So power consumption, Dr. John said a moment ago, is like $77 US per day to run a CO2 processing. And it is $500 a day, up to $500 a day running ethanol per power. So, I mean, that's a giant, that's a 7 times more expensive process, right? Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we use ethanol in our plant, right?
Yeah, we do.
We use ethanol in various places. So I think it's important to say we don't think ethanol as a whole is evil. It's just not probably the best business practice because of costs, because of testing, because of availability, because of a lot of different things that you talked about, because of the residuals, especially denatured ethanol. And if you move into food grade or medical grade or organic grade ethanol, that's not a problem. But there are other places that we use ethanol in this, especially as we are go.
Well, we do. Yeah, we use it in different places, and we use food grade ethanol. We use it for winterization process, for example. Not a problem. I mean, we don't have to worry about the residuals because we pay the extra amount for the for the food grade ethanol. But that food grade ethanol, we also don't have to worry about the residuals either then, because we got that. So You know, I did a quick, just kind of a bullet point list, and it's up on the board here if you want to focus up on that. So this is the variable costs. You have the cost of solvent changeover. You have the cost of solvent loss. You have the cost of revalidation of the solvent. You have labor. You have the cost of solvent removal. You have the cost of startup consumables. In other words, you know, reusing, or how much it's going to take for you to actually start up your operation. Your cost of utilities, that's the power and all that. Loss of product to carbon. A lot of people use carbon a lot, you know, basically to clean up their extracts. Loss of product to raffinate. In other words, not getting all the product out. The availability of the solvent, the biomass being hazardous waste, and also when you get rid of all of the ethanol from that biomass, you're creating a lot of VOC and HAP, which is, you know, those things are, you have to have permits for that. So it's different than CO2. So, you know, basically, if you add up all of those costs, those as from a variable perspective, and you compare it with CO2, it's not even in the same ballpark. You know, in terms of the amount of money it would cost you to create, you know, a kilogram of you know, CBD oil. The CO2 is way less. It's half, in fact. So it's a big deal. So, you know, a lot of people also talk, well, the ethanol equipment is a lot less costly, and that's true. The ethanol equipment is a lot less costly. Mm-hmm. In fact, you will pay almost, yeah, maybe anywhere from 2/3 to, you know, like double, basically, the costs, you know,
for
more
CO2,
more for CO2 equipment, right?
Equipment
exactly.
Versus ethanol.
So it'll take about, when you add up, you know, basically their operating costs, you basically are at the same point in about 2 months worth of operation for
2 months.
2 months.
2 months payback on that much equipment.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's where the crossover takes place. And then the CO2 from an operating standpoint just starts to kill ethanol completely.
Yeah, well, because then you've taken that cost differential out.
Right.
Okay, so now it's pure operating costs.
Right.
Okay, one of the questions that comes in a couple of times here is, what about throughput? Okay, give us an example of a CO2 process throughput versus an ethanol process throughput.
Okay, well, I mean, we're sitting in a 5 ton per day facility.
Yeah.
And we did a tour on that. You can go see our tour.
Oh yeah, and that's at extraktLAB.com
right.
/live-tour.
Yeah. So yeah, you can go see that, and essentially, so you know, typically there's ethanol, and they have 1 ton solutions, and they have, you know, even larger solutions.
Sure.
So they're both scalable. I don't say that they're not both scalable. They definitely are both scalable. So
okay.
What is an issue of scalability really has to do with occupancy in your building. Okay, so if I'm going to scale ethanol at some point in time, in very, very soon, I'm going to, the same occupancy, like there's F occupancy and H occupancy, okay? H occupancy is where you have like lots of solvent in the building, okay? And so your occupancy is going to change versus, and then your insurance is going to change on top of that. Okay. And so you have a whole bunch of other barriers there that you really need to be thinking about, like, you know, how much infrastructure do I need? What are my C1D2 rooms or C1D1 rooms I'm going to need? What, you know, how much is it going to cost me now for insurance now that when my insurance company comes through? Sure. Even if it's outside there, it's still on site. Gotcha. So, and then what about the building occupancy itself? You have to change that over. So there's a lot of different things you need to think
scale
about.
up, you've got to accommodate all of that ethanol.
Yeah, you do.
That you need to use.
You do.
Okay. So from a CO2 process footprint, and maybe I know we can answer the question. If we're doing a ton a day, how big of a space do you need to do that? Yeah. So with CO2.
Basically 400 square feet.
400 square feet.
Yeah. So that would be 3 of our 180 units essentially. And, you know, in 800 square feet, you'd have enough to put an elephant in the room too.
That's a ton a day.
Yeah.
Throughput.
Yeah. Like 800 square feet would be 2 tons a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's really, really small. It's really not, you don't need to have a lot of space for that. Now that's just for the equipment itself. And then you have, you do have, like, you have to have a CO2 place to put on your CO2. Usually that's a bulk tank that sits outside. Or you can even have like a cylinder tanks that sit inside. with our CO2 cage, for example,
Sure.
would be a good example of that. Yeah.
Okay, so on a comparative level, do you have an idea on how much floor space it might take for an ethanol facility
I think they're
for a
pretty,
ton a day?
yeah, they're pretty comparable.
Okay,
I mean, they're pretty comparable. I think you can fit it all in to a very small space. So, you know, so I don't think that there's really that much of a difference between, say, how much space it takes you to do ethanol versus how much space it takes you to do
for a ton a day.
yeah,
same
for a ton
thing.
a day, same thing.
Same
And the same thing for 5 tons a day. It's,
Okay.
I mean, they're pretty compact.
Okay.
I would say that you know, the full facility, you know, you can do 5 tons a day. You know, probably less than 15,000 square feet.
Wow.
That's not including all the storage and
Sure.
you know, all your inventory and everything. You know, that's bulky biomass that you have to store and
Sure.
stuff like that. So,
But the actual extraction process,
right,
that's what you need.
right, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's everything. That's like packaging.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's everything. Okay. So that's
You don't
That's
need a
not very
lot of
much.
space, no.
No.
And I mean, if you want to pull it out, if you want to add like corridors in there and things like that, you know, for GMP purposes, that'll get you some more space.
okay.
But, you know, a lot of people want to have everything together really close when they're doing GMP though, so that everything's, you know, they have different corridors and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's excellent. Can you talk, okay, so we talked a little bit about ethanol being used elsewhere in our process, sticking with ethanol versus CO2. And you said we use ethanol, food grade or organic grade, depending on what we're running right at the time.
Right.
So that's for winterization.
Right.
Right. And then we also use ethanol for some of our clean in place.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So CIP systems are called clean in place systems are really important for maintaining, you know, maintaining the cleanliness of your system. So if you are using ethanol to clean out your extractor, or you're using ethanol to clean out your distillation systems and things like that, those are typically low volume. And we use ethanol specifically for that purpose. And it works great. Ethanol is a good solvent along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of that kind of just as a sidebar, Randy, you know, a lot of people say that CO2 is not a good solvent. Well, that kind of is true. It's not a very good solvent. And that's actually the benefit. That's actually what we see as a benefit, because you use it and then you just increase or decrease the pressure, or, you know, and it goes away. So that's wonderful. That's what we want.
I said last week, it's just bubbles.
Right. As opposed to you have to cook, you basically have to evaporate ethanol. That takes a lot of energy to do that. So
Gotcha.
the fact that it's not a good solvent is actually a huge benefit.
Okay.
So
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Can you use the CO2 as a way to remediate THC? Or what is that best process for that?
Well, I don't think, yeah, the CO2 is not really selective in that way. So there really is no option for someone who says, okay, I want to use CO2 to remove THC. Now, if you have a chromatography process, which is Pure 99, which is one of our products, you can use CO2 in conjunction with another solvent to do that separation of THC and CBD.
Oh.
So that's what that is all about. Yeah.
Okay. So is that a place where we will selectively use ethanol on occasion
Yes.
to remove THC?
Yes.
Food grade, organic grade. Okay. So again, our primary process from a cost perspective is CO2.
Right.
And that is the benefit and the beauty. But you know, we're making decisions based on business. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's our job to help you make money, to grow revenue, especially in this market, right? So how do we help you grow revenue, reduce costs, do that? And so we want to have these very open conversations, and we're not afraid of the tough questions. These are crucial conversations for all of us. And it's, you know, we're not in the divisive, you know, red versus blue conversations, although sometimes it seems like it gets there, and it's crazy.
It goes there really quickly. I don't know why, really. I mean,
yeah,
it's
important to say, all right, we know that there's a huge embedded base of ethanol out there. The question is, how do you take the step to stay in business, to stay relevant, to stay active when you can't get ethanol anymore?
Right.
What do you do?
That's an issue.
So we've got,
Pretty much shut
small
down.
footprints that, we can put in for you. But you should consider a small footprint of CO2 anyway. I mean, that's just another thing. I'm throwing that out there. I'm not trying to pitch. I'm just saying it's just a good business model for these kind of occurrences.
Right.
When supply chain it sucks.
Yeah.
Frankly.
I mean, I think that anybody who needs help understanding what the comparison looks like from a business perspective, happy to go through that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'd say also, I have personally put in millions into manufacturing facilities.
Yeah.
And so I do that knowing what the end result is going to be.
Wow.
And so when you think about it from that standpoint, I'm talking to you not only as someone who is a scientist, who is an extraction scientist. I don't have a lab coat on. I guess that it doesn't make me a scientist, but I put a lot of money, of my own money into, basically into extraction facilities. And I mean, millions. And that was my choice because I knew after doing all the calculations and everything, that I would spend X amount of dollars in infrastructure. I could actually get insurance and I would be able to produce at, half the cost. Wow. So that makes a huge difference.
It's just good. It was your choice, your business practice, and you had the wherewithal and you had the intelligence to really research all of it and look at it from a very pure scientific perspective. And boy, when he makes decisions and I need a decision from him, we explore all hypotheses.
Yes. Analytically.
Yes. Painfully.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
That's fine. It's true. It can be painful.
But that's just good business.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we're doing that.
I'd say it's good business to make sure that there's that your analytical chemist can't measure residuals in your stuff.
Yeah.
That's good business.
Yeah.
And the reason it's good business is because it backs up your brand promise.
Yes.
Which is purity and consistency and potency and all that stuff. If we get in some stuff, I tell you, as an analytical chemist, we can see everything down to parts per trillion if we want to. We can see it, and the deal there is you just don't want to. And a yes accepts from your analytical laboratory that says, okay, yeah, this stuff is great is not good enough in my opinion. I'm giving the stuff that we make to our friends and family and to our customers. And so we have a brand promise. I care deeply about not eating solvents.
Yes.
As an analytical chemist. It's just something I don't like. I mean, I've been exposed to solvents, my entire career. And, we have what's called PPE and, everybody knows about that now, masks and everything. And we do things in hoods and we don't even want to breathe this stuff. And yet it's okay to have 5,000 ppm in your tincture. Give me a break. That's ridiculous.
Me. No.
Would you give that to your kids? No way.
No,
I wouldn't do it. But the laboratory will tell you it's all okay. And we have certs for it and says it's all okay.
And for most of us,
so we don't do that.
To our pets.
Huh?
Would we give it to our pets?
No, we would give it to our pets.
Sometimes that's more important. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
It is
Kids,
sometimes more
dogs,
important.
cats, living together, mass hysteria. Okay, question.
Yes.
This is a follow-up question, and so I want to revisit it.
Yeah.
The question from Ron is, can your system be used 100% ethanol free, or do you always need it for winterization?
Oh, yeah, you can run it winter. You can skip winterization with using subcritical and supercritical methods. So you can do that. You're limited on the products that you can get out of it. You can also use like in distillation methods, you can distill like crude and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's methods to do that. The reason when you get up into tonnage, that's really when it makes sense to have the ethanol. And because it's a lot faster. When you're using subcritical methods, it's just a lot slower. So,
and if you're using food grade at those levels, you're using far less ethanol in those processes, and it's food grade.
Right.
So you're less worried about all of this
Yes.
icky stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Icky, technical.
Very technical term.
From me over here. Okay. These questions are awesome. Keep bringing them in. This is great. I appreciate all of your input through the day. We're going to stick here with a couple more questions, but I wanted to, for those of you who have to bounce, I want to make sure that you know what we're doing. We're doing this again next week. We've got too many questions to even cover today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, you know, talking and sharing our information. Love all of the information that you are putting in the chat. Love that, and would love to continue to ask these questions. I'm not sure what is our next topic next week, but based on these questions, I think it's going to be pretty good. So look for your emails and bring in the questions. Let us know what you really want to hear about. John, before we get to these final few questions, is there anything else that you want to say that I wasn't able to ask or we didn't bring up that you really want to cover on this ethanol versus CO2 debate?
I just think that from the standpoint of purity, it's a big deal. And then from the standpoint of residuals, it's a big deal. So, you know, I would invite you to, when you do your own purchases, that's something I'm really serious about. When you do your own purchases, kind of look for the CO2 label. It makes a difference because there's no risk of residuals in that. So I would just recommend that as a something for you and your children and for your family.
All right. Thank you very much. Also, as we go through, we do have, you know, our team is, you know, ready to answer questions. And, you know, after this, there's a link somewhere, right, guys, to you can click on that. We call them CBD jam sessions. They're 20 minutes max. And we're there to answer questions, to walk through where you're stuck, where you have problems, where you're dissatisfied, where you're having difficulties. You know, bring those to us. Sign up for a CBD jam session. It's nothing. It'll take you right to a place where you can schedule a 20-minute calendar link with one of our guys. And they're just there to answer your questions. So, you know, go ahead and do that. The other one, Satva just sent another question here. Satva is making tinctures.
Oh, yeah.
So with tinctures, the question is, which method of extraction is best for that? And, you know, we've talked a lot at a very deep level.
Right.
So this is just bringing it right to reality.
Right. I mean, if you're going to make a product, you should be using I would use full spectrum distillate, or I'd use full spectrum like winterized oils for your tinctures. And then I would take that nice terpene mix and, you know, add flavor. So you have the essence of the plant in there. That's what I would do. Yeah. And it works great. I mean, it tastes good. And a lot of people make their tinctures up with either MCT oil, which is MCT oil, or they'll use olive oil or something like that, and it should be pretty easy to make up.
Excellent. So so what you're saying is you can dial in your own formulation.
Absolutely.
And
own concentration. Boom. And dial it in. No problem. And
some of these, you know, with the high terpene levels and the pulling those out early, the smell is lots of chlorophyll. It's a really nice smell. Yeah. And you'll like that. So there's going to be no question from your customers as you're building your brand. If those terpenes are in there, the big thing that people want to know is there really CBD inside? Yeah, that's right. And when you can smell it, you're like, oh, yeah, it must have. This is good.
It has it adds to the brand authenticity, obviously. And you want to, you know, you don't want to I would also recommend that you stay away from like synthetic, terpenes. Sure. Okay. You know, you can buy like, you know, pure grade synthetics. I wouldn't do that because there's obviously contaminants in there. I would say, you know, go ahead, use the plant. There's literally thousands of compounds in something like this. Wow. You know, and it's all natural. It comes from the plant. You don't use a lot. You don't use a lot. So you just put a little bit in for flavor and aroma.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, couple deep dive questions now to end this Q&A session. Amaru asks, is there any difference between the extraction of THC and CBD? It moved down the page, sorry.
CO2?
And what are the boiling points is the question.
Oh, what the boiling points. Okay, so let me talk first about the extraction of CBD
Please.
versus THC,
Okay.
and you know, there are some differences. It has to do with solubility of the cannabinoid. You know, we typically tend to get a better extraction efficiency with THC as compared to CBD. So, you know, we're basically averaging right around 90 to say 85 to 95% extraction efficiency with CBD, with average right around 90%. That's with CO2. When you are looking at, you know, extraction of THC, it's more like 90 to 100% with an average of 95 to 96%, you know, recovery. So those are some of the things you need to think about. The THC just comes out easier. It's more soluble. I think that there are negligible differences in solubility between THC and CBD for ethanol. Ethanol will dissolve everything, including your tongue. If you take some of that Everclear on there, yeah, okay. Or if you have lots of Scotch, of course. Oh, you can cast strength Scotch, of course, will dissolve your tongue. It's well known. Yes, so
cast strength is.
Yes, cast strength is tough.
Make your eyes water. But it's so good.
But it's so good, yeah.
Okay, couple more questions. Circling back to terpenes, are there additional benefits? I guess we can't really say benefits. Are there advantages, potential advantages of terpenes over flavor and aroma? Are there therapeutic? The question comes in: are there therapeutic effects, etc.?
Yeah, yeah, there are. And I think that a lot of people have now tried to correlate the entourage effect. Okay, and they've tried to show that, hey, look, if you have this particular terpene in combination with this particular cannabinoid ratio, that it's going to be metabolized better in your body because you have these particular markers or these particular proteins or these particular enzymes. So it actually, the science every day is getting better and better. And there's just all kinds of published papers on this. And it's a very exciting time because people are starting to use that information now to make therapeutic claims. Now, part of the issue with therapeutic claims is that they're therapeutic claims. Sure. You know, so yeah. I think in general that, look, you have a plant, you want to try to maintain the naturalness of the plant. Sure. So you get a full spectrum. You get a full spectrum terpene, like what we're obtaining, and you put that in, so you get full spectrum, and it just matches the plant. And so I think that's the best situation for most people. And yeah, I
think also there's a lot of brain science that I have friends in the neurology areas and stuff, and they talk about aroma as being a significant advantage in all essential oils. That's one of the key benefits. If you're smelling lavender, that's why when you go and buy it at the health food store, it says calm, right? Right. Or if you want some energy, you're doing eucalyptus or whatever. And they have those euphemistic names attached to those essential oils. Right. And it's the similar thing with the terpene because it's got that rich chlorophyll aroma. Right. Something happens in your brain. And so guys do this all the time, right? This is horrible. Smell this. Okay. Right. Right. Same thing. You're like, okay, you're already predisposed to know you're going to hate it. Right. Right. Pretty much. Yeah. It's what you do. And it's unfortunately, it's what we do to each other. Yeah. But that's on the inverse side. So there are those advantages and benefits. Right. Sorry. But those are a lot of studies. You can Google that kind of brain science. So those advantages are there. Holy cow, lots more questions coming in. One question that has come up is the current market and where it's going, because there have been some issues, and I don't like to make the whole issue about current. We like to have an evergreen effect on these, but this is a timely question for all of us. on how to maintain costs, how to grow, how do we lock arms together and protect the market out there, because there's some processors that are doing splits or premise extraction and different things that are kind of killing the market a little bit. Can you speak to that and where this market is headed? And is this just kind of a short blip? What are your thoughts?
Well, look, there's the studies that are out there, the market studies, you really should use those as your guiding light to the market. So people use those for investment. And, what they did was if you talk to the analysts who wrote these reports, and I used to do this, basically building up a market model from the base and then adding on the revenue year over year. And you think it's going to grow, and you come up with a model, and then you continuously improve that model. So there are many different analysts that are out there that are basically saying, okay, we're at a $1 to $5 billion market now, and some people are saying a $5.8 billion market. That's supposed to grow up to 20 plus billion in the next several years, like 5 or 6 years. So I think all of the people who are involved in this market, from the standpoint of operation or a brand or our extraction or even growing, there's going to be these ups and downs that we're experiencing, or that can experience a temporary lapses in the market, but we're still on this overall trajectory. Okay. All boats will rise with the tide, and basically the tide is coming in. So, make sure that your boat doesn't have any holes in it, because not all boats will rise with the tide. But if you have a hole in your boat, you're going to have a hard time floating. Just get in the market, ride the market up. And there's going to be lots of opportunities. There's going to be roll-ups that are occurring. There's going to be, businesses that are purchased. Maybe yours is the great brand that consumers really connect with. You have the opportunity to do that. It's kind of a white space. So I would encourage you to take heart and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we need to do, is really go for it. So what I'd like to do is make sure that, we answer your business questions as well. John talked about his background. My background is 30 plus years in roll-ups, acquisitions, businesses. I've written a book called The Intelligent Small Business. I even got the Congressional Medal of Honor for helping.
All right, man. That's pretty sweet. All right.
That and $7 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Who knows? Anyway, we're here, and those are the kind of questions we're looking for to help you with. Even when you do the CBD jam sessions, we don't need to just talk about your processes and things. We're happy to talk about your cash flow. How do you do revenue? How are you defining your brand? How are you defining your market avatar? What are you doing? How are you generating revenue? How can we come alongside you and help generate more profitable revenue for yourself? I had a business long ago, one of my first businesses that I started in the late 70s, early 80s. That's how old I am. And I was getting all this revenue in. Revenue. It's great. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was like losing 10 cents for every dollar I brought in. So the more revenue that was coming in, the faster I was losing money. And we don't, those are the kind of stupid ass things that we do.
Yeah.
And, that we have tripped over, that we can bring to you and answer questions for. So that's part of this Q&A session each week that we want to bring to you is the manufacturing, the processing for this industry, the business side, what we can do from a revenue generation perspective. What can we do to help you? That's why we're here.
Yeah,
right?
Basically. Yeah.
So test us. Let's go. And we're not trying to, anchor ourselves on one side of the desk. We want to lock arms with all of you and say, how do we get better? We all need to be in that mindset where we can actually, with more information, we change our mind. And, we're of that same ilk. Let's talk. Let's have good, productive dialogue so that we all can ride this wave up to, the 26 billion is the number I heard. But who knows where that is. But, that's just in the next 3 years. So that's giant. Let's lock arms and let's go there together. I appreciate you being here. John, amazing
Thank
show
you.
today.
Thank you.
This is good. We're going to be
been
back
fun.
next week. Watch for your emails.
Subscribe.
We do have a really good advanced extraction guide you can download. Schedule your CBD jam session. There's a link at the back side of this, or you'll get that. And we're happy to have those conversations with you. Tim and Barbara and Lucas will be happy to, talk to you. And if we need to get involved, happy to do that as well. Watch the live tour that John mentioned earlier. He did a great job going through that. It's really cool seeing this 5-ton-a-day facility in action. It's insane. So that's good. Like us on YouTube, if you would, like us, watch Instagram, Facebook, whatever you can. That would be really cool. And it helps us know. You can throw your questions anywhere. In any of those mediums, they'll kind of funnel to us.
Yeah.
Good. Any parting words, John?
No, just thanks for attending, and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll be catching you next week.
All right, guys. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Questions are amazing. Sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but we are here, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye now.